became aware in the media of this story around Savile. So Savile had died at the end of 2011. There has always been information in the background, in and around the media, about his behaviour. He's a very odd character. But
And what were your reflections then, even before these things had happened and before that we started, what we'll get onto? But did you, with your background, with your understanding of criminals and paedophiles, were you just like, this just doesn't?
he, Savile always came across as a slightly creepy individual. He was not one of my heroes. He was one of the nation's heroes. He was the brand. He actually fronted a sort of child safety prevention campaigns. He had his own television series, Jim will fix it. So Jimmy Savile, but Jim will fix it. He was knighted by the Queen. He also had the equivalent of a papal knighthood. He was networked with prime ministers through the royal family. He had all sorts of positions in society that you would never normally expect a celebrity to occupy. However, as a police officer, you're working on information being provided by the public, reports of crime, and if there isn't anything in the system, then you've got no reason to take action. But as I say, it's one of those cases that when the story broke, and it was actually our independent television network, ITV, who put the story through a programme in October 2012 about allegations of Savile and others, because it wasn't just him, abusing vulnerable young women at a school in Surrey. And there had been an initial investigation in 2009 by Surrey and Sussex Police. I wasn't aware of that. However, as ever with the media and celebrities, ITV start to trailer the story before they broadcast. So it's already a lead news story. Now, one of the challenges in the British policing structure is in England and Wales, we have 43 separate police forces. We have then the Police Service of Scotland and the Police Service of Northern Ireland. And there are a couple of other defence-type policing agencies. There is no one coordinating body for any of these. They all act independently. Go back probably 4 or 5 years, no, maybe longer than that actually, probably to the early 2000s. After the murder of Holly and Jessica in Soham in Cambridgeshire, we had recognised that intelligence and information wasn't being shared across police forces, and a system was developed called the Impact Nominal Index after a big public inquiry by Lord Bishard that pulled together and did a sort of dump of data into a system that we now call the Police National Database. So actually it allowed the fragmented intelligence system to be searched in a better way.
Yep.
It didn't work in the Savile case, interestingly enough, and I hadn't understood the complexities of how the Police National Database is structured. And if you don't get the spelling or the dates of birth exactly right, you won't necessarily get a hit on information that's in the system. And I'd actually asked my staff as the story was breaking, search our systems in the Met. Have we got anything on Savile? The answer I got was no. What was happening at a national level, what the forerunner of the National Crime Agency was actually called the Serious and Organised Crime Agency. They had a department that is called the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre, primarily dealing with internet crime, travelling sex offenders, but trying to operate really as a clearinghouse for information for the 43 forces. They had set up a coordinating centre around the Savile case. They'd recognised that this is a big news story. There may well be some more reports coming forward. Yep. They made probably the best decision that they could was to involve one of our big children's charities, the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, NSPCC, and had them working alongside them. Because it was a non-recent case, and I won't use the word historic because it's never historic for the victims, but they didn't have any expertise in that. So they asked the Met, and I provided a detective inspector and an analyst to support them with the investigation. Once the TV series or TV programme had been broadcast, many more people started to come forward to them, reporting through the NSPCC using their helpline. And we soon realised that actually there were offences in London. Surrey and Sussex had already had one try at this case, 2009, and I could see that there was likelihood going to be criticism of that, as ever, when the hindsight police turn up and they start reviewing how things have been investigated in the past. You'll always find it's never good enough. So we decided, we built this capability within the Child Abuse Investigation Command, and it was about the abuse of children. It wasn't adult rape as such, although there were plenty of examples of that. But what we did, we put the investigation with one of our major investigation teams. We use the Home Office linked major inquiry system, which is a database designed to process large volumes of information. And we went forward to tell the public that we were going to take this seriously, they were going to be listened to, and that we will take action. And it was like we'd empowered victims to come forward.
I remember that. I remember within the context of that time, just more and more victims, survivors coming forward. And I suppose in the background there, you were in this context of, well, we've got nothing on the system, to all of a sudden lots of reports coming in, but then all of a sudden, I suppose, all these other forces going, well, actually, we've got stuff as well. So you're kind of gathering information from the public whilst simultaneously gathering information from policing systems, plural. Is that?
Well, one of the key things with safeguarding is that you need to open as many pathways as possible for people to report. We kept the NSPCC with us. Now, a lot of the survivors of the abuse of celebrities and other people in powerful positions will have had bad experiences of trying to report first off. In the Savile case, there were victims that tried to report at the time were told, well, that's just Jimmy, what do you expect? Others felt threatened or intimidated. He said he had contacts in the police, which was true. So they wouldn't necessarily have the trust of the police to report. We kept the NSPCC helpline open, and one of the significant developments for them was they actually had to recruit 22 more staff to work on the helpline because of the massive increase in reporting. What I couldn't quite get my head round at the time that the story broke was that a massive amount of media interest, but they all wanted to blame the BBC. They're saying this is the BBC's fault. Well, when I first met with the BBC's lawyers in sort of the first week of the investigation, I asked them for their safeguarding policies from the 70s and 80s so that we could have a look and see how effective they were. And the BBC lawyer looked a bit blankly at me and I said, don't worry, I'm only joking. We didn't invent the concept of safeguarding until 1998 when the government produced a document called Working Together to Safeguard Children. The BBC would not have seen it as its responsibility to safeguard young people in the organisation in the 70s and 80s. That was down to parents or whoever. And all the organisations would have been the same. But our media was absolutely hell-bent on trying to hang the BBC out to dry for Savile. Now, there is some culpability. There has been a massive review. They didn't handle the information around him and others as effectively as they would, but probably not any different to any other big institution. When I was asked in our final press conference, and we were releasing a document at the time that we'd put together with NSPCC called Giving Victims a Voice. It's available on the internet. It's got all the data, all of the learning from the work around Savile himself, not necessarily the other cases. But one of the journalists said to me, so who's to blame? And I remember the response, because it's not actually written down anywhere, it's not in a press release or anything, but I remember saying, look, there's one person who's responsible for this abuse, who took in everybody in this country, from royalty to politicians to the public, to hospitals, prisons. His footprint, all that. We were all taken in by him. We were all fooled by him. And I just said, it's almost a throwaway remark, you could say he groomed the nation. And that, that actually gets debated on Mumsnet and in universities as a concept. Am I laying off blame too easily on someone else? But actually, that's what's happened.